The story begins in silence. A deep, wide silence that sits over the Pacific Ocean like a heavy blanket. It is the kind of silence that makes even the wind seem unsure of its own voice. It is early morning, and on a small American base far from home, a group of young men sit inside a dim room filled with wires, blinking lights, and machines that never sleep. They are tired, some barely awake, some living on coffee and hope alone. But in that thick silence they wait. They listen. Because in this war, listening has become as powerful as fighting. A soft crackle comes through the radio. At first, it sounds like nothing more than static, just another wave of noise from across the ocean. But one of the men leans forward. He hears something inside that static. A pattern. A rhythm. Words hidden, locked but real. Japanese naval code. A message not meant to be heard by American ears. He signals to the others. The room becomes still. Pens stop moving. Conversations fade. Something important has arrived, carried through thousands of miles of open sea. Perhaps this was where everything truly began. Outside, the world is deep in war. The Pacific is not just a map of blue water and islands. It is a battlefield spread across endless horizons. Japan seems unstoppable. Their navy moves like a fast, sharp blade. Their planes strike without warning. Their leaders plan with confidence, believing their messages are secret and unbreakable. And for a long time they were right. But in this small, windowless room, silence is slowly turning into power. The young men working here are not famous soldiers. They do not fly planes or fire weapons. They are codebreakers, quiet thinkers, puzzle solvers, people who see meaning where others see confusion. Some are language experts. Some are mathematicians. Some are simply brilliant minds who understand patterns better than faces. They wear simple uniforms. They work long hours. They rarely go outside. But every day they move closer to understanding the enemy's most important secrets. As the intercepted message is recorded and printed, one of the officers picks it up, reading the long strings of numbers and symbols that fill the page. To anyone else it would look like random marks. To these men it is a locked door. And behind that door may be something that could shift the entire war. They cannot yet know what this message contains. But they sense its weight. They can feel the tension in the air. Something is coming. Something that has the power to change lives on both sides of the ocean. Slowly the base wakes up. Lights flicker. Footsteps echo in the hallway. Morning begins its quiet entrance. But inside the intelligence room the sun does not matter. The true day has already started, and it started with a whisper in the dark. Far from this base, the Pacific Ocean stretches wider than any human imagination. It is beautiful, but it is also cruel. Its storms can swallow ships. Its distances can swallow hope. But in 1943, it is more than nature's creation. It is an arena of strategy, courage, and fear. Across these waters, leaders on both sides make decisions that will affect generations yet to come. Japan's most respected military mind is Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. He is a man who understands war in a way few people do. Calm, intelligent, and disciplined, he is the architect of Japan's early victories. He knows the strength of America. He warns his own government that fighting the United States would be a long and dangerous path. But once the war begins, he commits himself completely. His leadership inspires his men. His strategies shape the Pacific. America knows Yamamoto's name. They know his influence. And they know that every time he tries to move across the ocean, something significant may follow. Back in the code-breaking room, the message begins to travel through different hands, each pair working to break down the code step by step. The code they are dealing with is known as JN-25, one of Japan's most complex naval communication systems. It is built to confuse. Built to protect. Built so that even if the enemy hears a message they cannot understand it. But the Americans have been working on JN-25 for months, sometimes years, gathering small pieces, learning patterns, finding weaknesses. It is slow, exhausting work. But victory in war often depends on small steps. Now they begin to search for meaning in the new message. Some work through numbers. Some match symbols to known code groups. Some simply stare at the page, hoping intuition will bring a hidden truth into view. Hours pass. Conversations rise and fall. And then suddenly, a voice cuts through the room. "I think we found something." Everyone gathers around. A line of code has been cracked open. Inside it lies a set of coordinates. A time. A flight plan. Another codebreaker begins to match the information with known Japanese activity. Another checks previously intercepted messages. Slowly, like pieces of a map forming, the message begins to make sense. It is a schedule. A personal travel plan. And the person traveling is Yamamoto. For a moment, the room becomes completely silent. Not the sharp silence of fear, but the deep silence of realization. They know what this means. They know the weight of this discovery. And they know what the American leadership will do with this information. But for now they say nothing. They just stare at the decoded message as if it holds a future too heavy for their hands. Outside, the sun is higher now. The waves crash softly against distant shores. Birds fly over trees and mountains, unaware that history has just shifted in a quiet room filled with tired young men. They do not celebrate. They do not shout. They simply get back to work. Because decoding the message is only the beginning. The next steps will be heavier, more complex, and filled with questions that have no easy answers. Perhaps this was where the real journey began. Not in fire, not in battle, but in silence, patience, and the careful art of listening. The decoded message is carried up the chain of command. Officers read it with steady faces. They know the opportunity in front of them. They also know the danger. Acting on this information could change the war. But it could also reveal America's secret, that Japanese codes are no longer safe. If Japan discovers the truth, they will change their entire system, and months of work could vanish overnight. Lives could be lost. Battles could shift. The war could grow longer. So the leaders must make a choice. A quiet choice made behind closed doors, where no one else will ever hear the conversations. The message is shown to President Franklin Roosevelt and the highest-ranking military officers. They study the details. They talk about risk, about strategy, about responsibility. And finally, they make a decision that will shape the course of the Pacific War. They agree to send a squadron of American pilots on a mission. A mission so secret that even the pilots will not know the full truth. They will not be told how the intelligence was found. They will not be told the name of the man they are flying toward. They will only be told that the fate of the Pacific may rest on their success. The codebreakers return to their desks. The pilots prepare for a long journey. Leaders exchange firm looks. No one speaks of victory. No one speaks of revenge. They move as carefully as shadows across a quiet floor. The silence continues. But now it carries a new meaning. Because silence once again has become a weapon. The days leading up to the mission feel strangely calm. The ocean breathes in slow waves. The sky stretches endlessly, holding quiet clouds that drift without urgency. But beneath this peaceful surface, the Pacific is filled with hidden movements. Ships, aircraft, and intelligence teams all play their parts in a giant, invisible game of strategy. At the American base, the pilots chosen for the mission gather in a small room. They look young, some barely older than students. Yet their eyes carry something older: responsibility, fear, and courage mixed together in a way only war can create. They sit silently as their commanding officer stands in front of them. He doesn't give them dramatic speeches. He doesn't describe the enemy in harsh words. He simply explains that they must fly farther than they have ever flown before, across open water with almost no room for mistakes. They must leave at the first light of dawn. They must stay hidden, flying low over the ocean. And they must reach a point where time and distance meet with exact precision. But he does not tell them the name of the person they are flying toward. That detail remains locked away, known only to a few. The pilots nod slowly. They understand the risks. They understand that silence surrounds the mission, protecting it like a second layer of armor. And yet, none of them step back. None refuse. They prepare their flight gear with calm, steady hands. Their hearts beat with a mix of fear and purpose, but their minds stay focused. Back at the code-breaking room, the young intelligence workers feel a different kind of pressure. They sit quietly, pretending to return to normal tasks, but they can't stop thinking about the decoded message. They imagine the pilots preparing. They imagine the vast ocean the mission must cross. They imagine how thin the line is between success and disaster. For a moment, one of the codebreakers closes his eyes. He tries to remind himself that his job is not to fly, or to fight, or to make decisions. His job is to understand, to reveal what was meant to stay hidden. And sometimes, that is a heavier weight than any weapon. The night before the mission, the American base falls into a rare stillness. Engines rest. Lights dim. Conversations fade. The wind moves softly across the hangars. Some pilots write short letters home. Some sit quietly staring at the sky. Others try to sleep but lie awake listening to the ticking clock on the wall. Perhaps this was the last quiet moment before history would turn. Far across the ocean, the Japanese forces prepare for their own journey. They do not know they have been overheard. They do not know that every detail of the Admiral's travel plan has already crossed enemy hands. They move confidently, believing their security is unbreakable. Their planes are ready, their officers focused. Yamamoto himself rises before dawn, calm and disciplined, unaware of the silent eyes watching him from far away. The morning arrives without drama. A faint gold light touches the ocean, spreading warmth across waves and wings. The American pilots gather around their planes, sleek, silver P-38 Lightnings built for speed and range. Ground crews move around them with practiced motions. There are no loud instructions, no rushing. Everything flows with quiet precision. The engines start, filling the air with a low hum. The sound vibrates through the ground, through the metal of the planes, and through the hearts of everyone watching. It is the sound of purpose. The sound of a journey that cannot be undone once it begins. The pilots climb into their cockpits. They adjust their straps, check their instruments, and breathe deeply. They know they must fly hundreds of miles over open ocean with no landmarks, no guidance except for skill, training, and trust. They taxi out onto the runway. The sky waits ahead. Then, with a burst of power, they take off, one after another, lifting into the early morning light. High above them, the world seems peaceful. But below, the sea stretches endlessly. It is empty, quiet, and dangerous. The pilots fly low, almost touching the tops of the waves, where radar cannot easily find them. The ocean's surface blurs beneath their wings. Salt and wind press against their windows. The mission has begun. Inside the planes, the pilots say very little. They speak only when needed. Most of the flight is silent. Just the steady hum of engines, the soft rattling of controls, and the sound of their own breathing inside their helmets. Hours pass. Their arms grow tired. Their eyes fight to stay sharp. They know that a single mistake in direction or altitude could send them into the sea. But they keep going. At the intelligence base, the codebreakers continue their work, pretending the day is like any other. Yet every hour feels heavier. Every minute stretches longer than the last. They are not waiting for news, they know news may never come. They are waiting for something more subtle. The sense that the world has shifted, that something important has happened even if they cannot hear it. Meanwhile, in the Pacific sky, the pilots begin to approach the area where timing must be perfect. They trust their calculations. They trust their fuel. And even though they do not know the name of the man they have been sent to intercept, they trust that this mission matters. As they reach the final stretch, a distant shape comes into view. A small formation of aircraft, flying with careful discipline, moving exactly where the decoded message said they would be. The American pilots do not feel excitement. They feel the weight of responsibility. They must act with restraint, focus, and precision. They must avoid revealing too much. They must complete their mission quickly and disappear. What happens in the next moments is not described in detail here, for history can be told without repeating every part of conflict. What matters is that the mission reaches its turning point. The American pilots carry out their orders with discipline, and the Japanese formation is disrupted. No graphic scenes are needed. The event itself carries enough weight without vivid description. When the mission is complete, the American planes turn back toward their distant base. They do not speak much over the radio. Their fuel is low. Their nerves are tight. Their bodies feel heavy with adrenaline and emotion. But slowly the ocean beneath them shifts from a place of danger back into a path home. Hours later, the base hears the distant sound of engines. One by one, the planes return, touching the runway with quiet relief. Ground crews rush toward them. The pilots climb out, exhausted, their faces pale but calm. Some lower their heads, lost in their own thoughts. Others simply breathe deeply, as if waking from a long, strange dream. They are not told the full truth immediately. They are not asked for heroic statements. They simply walk back toward the hangars, knowing they completed something important, even if they do not know exactly what it was. Meanwhile, in the code-breaking room, the young analysts wait. The hours stretch. They check clocks. They check messages. Their hands tremble slightly, though they try to hide it. Then, somewhere in the command center, a quiet confirmation arrives. The room does not erupt in celebration. There is no cheering, no applause. Only a soft exhale, a long, tired breath shared between people who have carried a secret too heavy for their shoulders. They know the mission succeeded. They know the decoded message changed the course of the war. And they know they must never reveal how the information was found. The leaders send word to the highest circles. Reports are written in careful language designed to protect the truth. The codebreakers return to work. The pilots return to their routines. The world outside remains unaware that history took a sharp turn today because a whisper traveled across the ocean and landed in the right hands. In Japan, news travels slowly and quietly. The event is kept hidden for morale reasons. High officials receive the message with heavy hearts. Soldiers feel a sense of loss that is too deep for words. Yet the public hears nothing, at least not for a long time. The Pacific continues to move with its usual rhythm. Waves rise and fall. Winds shift. Ships travel from island to island, unaware that the invisible balance of power has changed. Perhaps this was the moment when the war began to bend in a new direction, guided not by firepower, but by listening, patience, and the quiet skill of people working in the shadows. The world does not yet know it, but silence has rewritten the future. The days after the mission feel strangely normal on the surface, yet something in the air has changed. It is as if the Pacific itself is holding a quiet breath, waiting for the world to realize what has happened. No newspapers report it. No radio speaks of it. But behind closed doors, in rooms filled with maps and telephones, high-ranking officers study new possibilities. For the American codebreakers, life returns to the familiar rhythm of long hours and quiet rooms. They do not receive medals. They do not get public praise. Their victory is silent, hidden inside folders marked top secret. But each of them knows they played a part in something greater than themselves. They know that their patience, their sharp minds, and their ability to see patterns inside chaos have changed the direction of the war. One of the young analysts walks outside during his break and looks at the ocean. For months he has seen only numbers and symbols. But now he sees something else. A horizon that once felt threatening now feels slightly more open. A future that once seemed uncertain now feels a little brighter. He takes a deep breath, letting the wind carry away the weight he has been holding. Yet even in moments of relief, there is a quiet understanding. The work is not over. The war is not over. And the codes will keep coming. Inside the intelligence center, the officers update their files. They adjust their predictions. They send new instructions to naval commanders. Each small piece of information they gather helps shape the next step in a conflict too large for any single person to control. Meanwhile, among the pilots, the mission slowly becomes a shadow in their memory. They are not allowed to talk about it openly. They cannot share what they experienced, not even with friends or family. They keep their thoughts tucked away in private corners of their minds, only revisiting them during quiet nights when sleep feels far away. Some feel pride. Some feel confusion. Some feel the heavy question that sits in the heart of every soldier. Why me? Why was I chosen for this moment in history? But these questions stay unspoken, floating between what they know and what they cannot say. Far across the ocean, the Japanese military faces a different kind of silence. When the news reaches their leadership, it arrives like a soft blow that does not hurt immediately but grows painful over time. They lose not only a respected commander but also a sense of safety. They begin to wonder how such a precisely timed operation could have happened. Some suspect a leak. Some suspect luck. But very few consider the true answer, that their own coded messages, believed to be unbreakable, have been opened like a locked door with a missing key. For now, the truth remains hidden from them. The world is wide, and wars are often shaped not by loud battles but by quiet decisions. Deep inside coded messages. Deep inside human choices. Deep inside moments that seem small at first but ripple across time. The Pacific theater becomes a place of shifting strategies. America grows more confident in its ability to anticipate Japan's moves. Japan grows more cautious, more aware that every message they send carries a risk. The balance that once seemed fixed begins to tilt. Ships change their routes. Patrols change their timing. Leaders rethink their next steps. The war becomes less predictable, less comfortable for those who once believed they had a clear path to victory. Months pass. New operations rise and fall. New missions succeed or fail. But at the center of it all, intelligence work remains the quiet heartbeat of strategy. Every intercepted message is examined carefully. Every decoded line is weighed and measured. And though not every message holds the importance of the one that revealed Yamamoto's journey, each one is a piece of a massive puzzle. One older analyst, a mentor to many of the younger officers, explains it simply: we do not look for big secrets. We look for small truths. Because small truths, when put together, can shape the world. Back at the American base, daily life slowly returns to its usual pace. The codebreakers sit at their desks, their lamps illuminating stacks of papers filled with numbers and strange symbols. They drink coffee that has grown cold. They laugh quietly at small jokes. They stretch their tired hands. They stare at their latest puzzles with tired but determined eyes. And every now and then they remember the day they decoded something that changed everything. One analyst, a quiet man who rarely speaks unless necessary, still keeps a small copy of the decoded message in his mind. He remembers how the symbols transformed into coordinates, how the coordinates formed a path, and how that path revealed a turning point in the war. He wonders what would have happened if they had missed it, or if someone had looked in another direction at the wrong moment. History is strange that way. Sometimes it hangs on a single detail, a single discovery, a single whisper carried across the ocean. Even as months pass, the codebreakers never fully let their guard down. They understand something important about war. Victories are fragile, and secrets are the threads that hold everything together. If one thread breaks, the rest may follow. So they keep working, not for praise or recognition, but because the world depends on their invisible efforts. Some nights, when all is quiet and most of the base is asleep, the intelligence room glows softly. The machines hum. Pages turn. Pens scratch across paper. It looks peaceful, almost gentle. But the truth is that this room holds the power to shape battles long before they begin. The people inside it fight a different kind of war, one without guns or explosions, one where the enemy is uncertainty and the battlefield is the human mind. Across the ocean, the Japanese officers sit around large tables, reviewing their own plans. They hold serious discussions about communication, routes, and strategy. They begin to suspect that something deeper is happening. Their confidence in their messages weakens. They adjust their codes. They try new methods. But code breaking is not a game of luck. It is a game of patience, observation, and intelligence. And once a pattern has been learned, it cannot easily be forgotten. Even as Japan attempts to strengthen its secrecy, the Americans continue to watch carefully, waiting for another moment of clarity. They know the war is far from over. They know more challenges are coming. But they also know they have found something powerful, the ability to hear what was never meant for their ears. The Pacific, once controlled by Japan's swift and confident movements, begins to shift in America's favor. Every island campaign, every naval engagement, every supply line feels different now. There is a quiet advantage, a sense that the Americans understand their enemy more deeply than before. But even this advantage does not remove the cost of war. Lives are still lost. Battles still rage. Families on both sides wait anxiously for news. The world continues to turn, carrying the weight of millions of hopes and fears. One evening, an American pilot from the mission sits alone on an empty bench near the shoreline. He watches the sun sink into the ocean, painting the sky with soft orange light. The waves roll in gently, whispering against the sand. He thinks about the mission. He thinks about the silence they flew through, the long stretch of ocean beneath them, and the moment they returned home. He feels a quiet pride but also a quiet burden. History touched him even though he never asked for it. He closes his eyes for a moment, breathing in the smell of salt and wind. He knows the world will never fully understand what happened out there. And he knows he may never speak of it openly. But he also knows something important. Sometimes, duty means carrying a story that no one else can see. In another part of the base, a codebreaker finishes his shift and steps outside. He looks up at the stars, scattered across the sky like small sparks of truth. For the first time in a long while, he feels at peace. The stars remind him that even in darkness there are patterns, signals, messages, hints. And if you learn to read them, the world becomes a place of deeper meaning. Perhaps that is what this entire journey has been about, learning to listen. Listening to numbers, to voices, to silence. Listening until hidden truths rise from the noise. The Pacific War continues, but something fundamental has shifted. America has discovered the power of intelligence, the strength of careful observation, and the importance of small moments. Japan has discovered that secrecy is fragile, and that even the strongest plans can be undone by a single unseen listener. And somewhere between these two truths, history continues its slow, steady march. What happened that day in the sky did not end the war. It did not erase the hardships faced by millions. But it changed the direction of events. It gave hope to some and caution to others. It taught the world that knowledge can be as powerful as force. And the message that started it all, the intercepted, coded message that drifted across the ocean, remains a reminder of how fragile and powerful communication can be. A whisper can shift a war. A pattern can save lives. A moment of silence can reveal a truth long hidden. History turns on details. And sometimes, those details lie in the hands of people who work quietly, patiently, and without praise. As time moves forward, the events of the mission slowly begin to blend into the larger story of the war. The Pacific remains a place of danger and strategy, filled with storms, islands, and the constant movement of ships and aircraft. But beneath all the action, a quieter story continues to unfold. The story of intelligence, patience, and the humans behind the codes. The American codebreakers continue their work with steady dedication. Day after day they study new messages. Some are simple and routine. Some are confusing. Some carry clues that may shape the next major decision. Their room still feels the same, the low lights, the endless papers, the quiet hum of machines. But the people inside it have changed. They now understand the true weight of their work. Sometimes, during the quieter hours, a young codebreaker wonders about the pilots who carried out the mission. He imagines their long journey over the ocean. He imagines the moment they returned home, their faces tired but full of quiet strength. He realizes that even though he never met them, their lives and his work became connected for a brief moment in history. And that connection remains with him, shaping the way he sees each new message that comes across his desk. He knows that behind every line of code there are real people. People preparing for missions. People planning attacks. People hoping to survive another day. And because of that, he treats each message with the seriousness it deserves. Not because he wants praise, but because he understands responsibility. Across the ocean, the Japanese command continues to function, but something subtle has shifted. The loss of Yamamoto carries emotional weight, even if the public does not hear about it immediately. Among officers and soldiers, his absence is felt like a missing star in the night sky. It changes the atmosphere, changes confidence, changes the rhythm of decision-making. Yet the Japanese military remains strong, disciplined, and determined. They continue their operations with precision. But a quiet uncertainty enters their planning. A soft question that sits beneath their strategies: how much does the enemy know? When they discuss communication security, their voices are firm. They must improve. They must adapt. They must protect their information more tightly. But even as they tighten their methods, the Americans have already learned the patterns. The game of intelligence is not easily reversed once it begins. As months pass, American forces start gaining more ground in the Pacific. They win key battles. They push forward island by island. Their confidence grows not from arrogance but from understanding. They now see the importance of both strength and intelligence. They use their knowledge not to boast but to move carefully, one step at a time. High-ranking American leaders quietly study the results of their decisions. They know that using intelligence in war carries risks. They must choose which information to act on and which to ignore. They must avoid revealing too much. They must protect the codebreakers and the methods that made their success possible. Because if Japan realizes how deeply the Americans have entered their communication, the advantage could disappear overnight. The war becomes a balancing act between action and silence. The pilots who carried out the mission return to their usual duties, but their lives are forever changed. Some are sent on new missions. Some train younger pilots. Some simply continue flying one day at a time, carrying the memory of their secret journey close to their hearts. One pilot, a calm and thoughtful man in his late 20s, reflects often on that long flight across the ocean. He remembers the endless blue stretching beneath him. He remembers the pressure he felt in his chest when he saw the enemy formation in the distance. And he remembers the moment he returned home, unsure how to process what had happened. That he knows he did his duty. He knows he followed orders with discipline. But he also knows that duty sometimes comes with emotional cost. And even though he cannot share the details, the memory shapes him. It makes him more aware of the weight of leadership. More aware of the softness of life. More aware of the quiet power of decisions made far away in rooms filled with papers and code. One evening, as he sits outside watching the sun dip behind the palm trees near the base, he closes his eyes and listens to the wind. It sounds gentle, almost kind. And for a moment he feels grateful, not for the mission itself but for the chance to reflect, to breathe, to understand the complicated nature of war. At the intelligence center, the older officer who oversees the codebreakers decides to speak to his team. He gathers them in the small room where the decoded message first revealed its secret. He looks at each of their faces, young but no longer inexperienced. Their expressions show fatigue, curiosity, pride, and subtle worry. He tells them something simple: you are the quiet guardians of this war. You may not stand on a battlefield, but your minds shape what happens out there. The room falls silent as his words settle into their hearts. He does not speak of glory. He does not speak of victory. He speaks of responsibility, of care, of intelligence used with caution. And then he returns them to their work, knowing the future still holds many unanswered questions. The Pacific winds shift again, carrying the scent of salt and distant rain. The ocean moves as if it remembers everything that has happened and everything still to come. Waves roll across thousands of miles of open water, touching shores of islands where soldiers wait, where messages travel, where decisions change the fates of entire nations. Somewhere in Washington, D.C., a historian in uniform begins collecting reports, letters, and documents that will one day form part of the official record. He reads the coded messages, the mission logs, the reports from naval officers. He senses that something extraordinary has happened. A moment that feels small on paper but carries meaning far beyond the written words. Years later he will understand that this moment marks a turning point in the war. But at the time, it is simply another report to file, another story to tuck away in the government's growing archive. Back in Japan, the loss of Yamamoto remains a painful secret. The Japanese government eventually announces it, but they do so carefully. They choose their words with precision, trying to soften the emotional shock for their people. Soldiers bow their heads. Citizens feel a quiet sadness. Yamamoto was not just a commander, he was a symbol of discipline, intelligence, and careful planning. Now his absence becomes a symbol too. It marks a shift in the war's direction, a subtle change in momentum. And although the Japanese forces continue to fight with determination, a sense of vulnerability begins to appear. Small at first, then growing as the months unfold. Back in the code-breaking room, one young analyst finds himself reflecting often on that turning point. He remembers the first moment he saw the decoded symbols. He remembers the silence that settled over the room. He remembers the quiet understanding that they were holding a piece of history in their hands. He sometimes wonders if things might have happened differently, if the message had never arrived, if their minds had failed to see the pattern, if the pilots had missed their target. These thoughts are heavy, but they help him understand the delicate nature of war. Victory is never guaranteed. It is built from thousands of small steps, decisions, and moments of clarity. He begins to keep a small notebook where he quietly writes down his thoughts at the end of each day. Not detailed work notes, but reflections. Simple, honest sentences about fear, responsibility, and the strange nature of listening to other people's secrets. He writes things like, "War teaches us to hear the things that silence tries to hide." Or, "Sometimes the softest signals carry the greatest truth." And on one page he writes, "A whisper changed the world today." He does not know if anyone will ever read his notebook. But writing helps him understand himself, and the role he plays in a war too large to grasp all at once. As months turn into a year, the impact of the mission becomes clearer. America gains more ground in the Pacific. Japan begins to feel the pressure of a long, difficult conflict. And intelligence work becomes one of the most important tools in the American arsenal. More young minds join the code-breaking teams. New technology is developed to improve the speed of analysis. The intelligence rooms buzz with new energy, new strategies, new puzzles to solve. And yet, the original team still carries a special honor in silence. They were the ones who heard the message that changed the tide. One evening, as the day ends and the intelligence team begins to close their files, the older officer stands by the window, watching the sun set behind the palm trees. He reflects on everything they have experienced. The small victories. The long nights. The doubts. The breakthroughs. He whispers softly to himself, "War is not won by noise. It is won by understanding." Outside, the world softens. The sky dims. And the Pacific wind carries a gentle reminder that even the quietest actions can shape the future. As the war pushes deeper into its later years, the story of the intercepted message begins to fade into the background of larger military operations. Battles grow bigger. Strategies become more complex. Nations push hard to gain every inch of advantage they can. But even as the world focuses on ships, planes, and armies, the quiet work of intelligence continues, shaping events without ever stepping into the spotlight. The American codebreakers remain at the heart of this effort. Their days begin before sunrise and end long after the sky has grown dark. They flip through stacks of intercepted messages, searching for patterns inside long rows of numbers. They listen to distant signals coming through cracked speakers. They write, erase, and rewrite symbols again and again until something finally makes sense. Sometimes the work feels endless. Sometimes it feels like chasing shadows. But every now and then, one small detail, one repeated number, one familiar code group, one recognizable phrase, turns uncertainty into clarity. And that clarity becomes the foundation for decisions made thousands of miles away. One young analyst, new to the team, often asks himself if this quiet work truly matters. He joined the military expecting action, movement, challenge. Instead, he found himself surrounded by pencils, paper, and machines humming softly in dusty corners. But one of the older analysts gently reminds him, "We do not fight battles here. We prevent them, or change them, or shorten them." These words stay with the young analyst. He begins to see his desk not as a prison of routine, but as a place where lives may be protected long before danger arrives. Across the Pacific, American forces begin to learn the profound value of intelligence. Commanders start asking for code-breaking updates more often. Naval officers check in with intelligence teams before launching missions. Pilots ask if any new messages hint at enemy movements or potential traps. Slowly the culture shifts. Silence, once overlooked, becomes a powerful ally. On the Japanese side, the war grows more challenging. They face increasing pressure from American forces. They lose key positions. Their supply lines weaken. Their confidence begins to soften, not because of a single event, but because the war grows heavier with every passing month. Yet the Japanese spirit remains strong. Their officers continue to plan with discipline. Their soldiers continue to fight with determination. And their commanders continue to search for ways to regain control. They adjust their codes. They change communication methods. They move more carefully. But even the greatest care cannot hide everything in a world filled with listening ears. One Japanese officer, dedicated to the security of naval communication, reviews every message before it is sent. He double-checks numbers. He studies the encryption. He believes deeply in the strength of their systems. But even he senses a feeling of unease, like a shadow behind his shoulder. A sense that something is slipping through cracks too small to see. He writes in his personal journal, "Information is the pulse of war. If the pulse is exposed, the heart grows weak." His words carry a truth he does not yet fully understand. Back on the American side, the pilots who carried out the mission continue to live quietly. Some transfer to new bases. Some stay where they are. Some complete their service and return home. But none of them forget the mission. Even if they never speak of it, it remains inside them, an invisible chapter of their lives shaped by silence and long stretches of ocean. One pilot years later will describe it simply, "We flew toward something the world would not speak of. And when we returned, we carried a story that stayed inside us forever." For now, though, he wakes each day, prepares his plane, and carries out whatever orders come next. The war keeps moving, and so does he. At the intelligence center, a different kind of quiet reflection settles in. The codebreakers think often about the strange nature of their job. They spend hours working on problems they cannot talk about. They hold secrets that cannot be written in letters. Their victories are not celebrated. Their struggles are not seen. Yet they continue because they understand the deeper truth. Not all heroes stand in the open. Some stand in shadows, guiding those in the light. One evening, the older officer gathers his team once again. He senses that fatigue has begun to spread among them, like a slow-moving wave. He looks at their tired faces and speaks softly. "You may wonder if anyone will remember this work," he says. "You may wonder if history will ever know what happened in this room. But remember this, the future is built on the choices we make now. Even if the world does not see your name, it will feel your actions." The room grows still. The young analysts listen carefully. His words do not erase their fatigue, but they fill them with a renewed sense of purpose. Outside, the night sky glows with stars. The wind moves across the trees with a soft whisper. Even the ocean seems to listen. The next day, work continues. Messages arrive. Codes shift. Patterns reappear. The team moves through each task with patient focus. They breathe deeply, sharpen their pencils, and begin again. Meanwhile, across the sea, Japanese communications become more controlled, more careful. But no code can hide everything forever. Patterns remain. Human habits remain. And the Americans, now skilled in reading between the lines, begin to understand Japanese strategy in ways they never did before. In this new phase of the war, intelligence becomes the silent guide, pointing American forces toward safer routes, preventing ambushes, revealing enemy plans before they unfold. There is no dramatic music. No loud announcement. Just a steady, quiet advantage earned through hours of careful listening. One afternoon, a young analyst finds a message that contains unusual timing instructions. He brings it to his senior officer, who studies it closely. Together, they realize that the message hints at a supply movement that could affect an upcoming naval battle. The officer nods. "This is important. Share it with the command team." And so, another small choice ripples outward, affecting ships, commanders, and operations miles away. Once again, silence becomes the thread tying events together. As time passes, the world begins to sense that the Pacific War is shifting. Newspapers report American successes. Families feel hope. Soldiers at the front receive better support. Japanese armies face more challenges. And beneath all these changes, the power of intelligence continues to shape the deeper currents of conflict. In quiet rooms filled with machines and dim lamps, the codebreakers work through long nights. They grow older in a matter of months. They learn to read the enemy's mind in numbers and patterns. They learn to trust their instincts. And they learn something important about history. It often turns in moments unseen by most people. One day, a new message arrives. It is longer than usual, heavy with strange symbols. The analysts gather around it, sensing that it carries something significant. They work hour after hour, cutting through confusion until clarity emerges. The message contains information about Japanese decisions that will affect the entire region. The officer reads it carefully, then sends it to Washington. His hands tremble slightly. He knows this will guide new operations, new strategies, new outcomes. But even as he sends the report, he whispers quietly to himself, "Let this help the world find peace faster." He is tired. He does not crave victory. He craves safety, for the soldiers, for the world, for the generations that will follow. Across the ocean, the pilots continue their missions. They face storms, long distances, and dangerous situations. But many of them survive because intelligence has shown them where not to fly, where danger may be hiding, and where opportunities lie. One pilot looks back on the mission months later and realizes something profound. The hardest part was not the flight. It was the silence. Silence before we took off, silence in the sky, silence when we landed. Silence protects. Silence hides. Silence also changes you. In the bigger picture of the war, small acts of listening have created large waves of change. America grows stronger. Japan faces increasing challenges. And the Pacific, once a place where Japan moved confidently, becomes more balanced, more contested, more unpredictable. The war still continues. Lives are still lost. Hard decisions still must be made. But the silent world of intelligence gives America new hope, new clarity, and new opportunities to protect its forces and push toward victory. As the months stretch forward, the importance of the Yamamoto mission becomes clear, not because of the action in the sky but because it proved that silence could be shaped into something powerful. It proved that war is not just about force. It is also about knowledge, understanding, and the human ability to find truth inside confusion. The codebreakers carry this knowledge with them. The pilots carry it too. And together, without ever meeting, they help turn the tide of history. As the war continues, the intelligence rooms grow busier than ever. New messages arrive every day, some short, some long, some confusing, and some carrying hints of plans that could change the next month of fighting. The codebreakers study each one with steady patience. They divide the work, share ideas, and check every detail twice. They know that mistakes can lead to danger and small truths can lead to safety. They also know something deeper now. Even though the world around them grows louder with battles, the heart of the war beats in silence. One evening, after a long shift, a young analyst walks outside and sits on a bench facing the ocean. The sky is soft blue, stretching into purple as the sun dips behind the water. He thinks about how strange his life has become, how he spends his days reading messages from an enemy he will never meet, and how the smallest clue can affect soldiers at sea or pilots in the sky. A gentle wind brushes past him. He closes his eyes and breathes slowly. He wonders how many people, in future years, will understand what really happened during these quiet hours in the code-breaking room. How many will know that victory often comes from patience, not from noise? How many will remember that intelligence, though unseen, is as important as any weapon? But he also understands something else. Recognition is not why he works. He works because lives depend on accuracy. Because the world depends on truth. Because he is part of a team that sees what others cannot. Deep inside the intelligence office, the older officer sits alone at his desk. Papers are stacked on both sides. A dim lamp glows above him. His face is calm but lined with responsibility. He reviews the latest messages with care. Some bring useful information. Some bring warnings. Some bring uncertainty. He takes a slow breath, then stands and walks to a map covering the wall. He studies the wide ocean, the lines of movement, the islands marked with small pins. He taps one spot gently, thinking of the many soldiers who stand there now, waiting for orders shaped by the work in this building. He whispers softly, "War is fought with choices." Across the Pacific, the Japanese military also works tirelessly. Their commanders prepare new strategies, study American movements, and adjust their codes. Their soldiers stand watch, their pilots prepare, their officers calculate complex plans. But the loss of Yamamoto continues to cast a quiet shadow. It is not spoken of openly, but it sits in the minds of those who once looked to him for guidance. One Japanese officer reflects in his journal, "A single event can create ripples we cannot see. We must adjust. We must continue." but the ocean has changed. His words reflect not defeat but awareness, an understanding that the war has shifted into a new phase where information, not just strength, will decide what happens next. As intelligence becomes more important, American commanders begin to trust their code-breaking units even more. They study decoded messages closely, using them to plan operations with greater precision. When ships move, they often do so with knowledge created by the codebreakers' quiet work. When pilots take to the air, they sometimes fly with information that protects them from unseen risks. A captain, preparing his men for a future battle, says to his officers, "If intelligence gives us even one small advantage, it could save hundreds of lives." Those words echo the deeper truth of the war: every bit of information matters. Meanwhile, the pilots who flew the mission to intercept Yamamoto continue to carry their memories quietly. Some are transferred to other units. Some remain with their original squadrons. Some face new dangers in the sky as the war pushes forward. But each of them holds a small piece of history inside their hearts. One of the pilots often wakes before dawn and walks along the shoreline. The ocean looks peaceful, but he knows how quickly peace can disappear. He watches the waves roll in and out, and with each wave he feels a quiet reminder of the mission that changed him. He does not regret what he did, but he understands the weight of it now more than ever. He once thought war would be clear, right and wrong, victory and defeat. Now he sees that war is full of questions, heavy choices, and moments where silence holds more truth than sound. He looks at the horizon and whispers to himself, "I hope the world one day learns from this." Back in the intelligence room, new codebreakers join the old team. They bring fresh eyes, new energy, and different ways of seeing patterns. The older analysts teach them patiently, explaining the rules of the codes, the common mistakes, and the deeper understanding needed to make sense of confusing messages. One new analyst asks, "How do we know when we've found something important?" The older officer smiles and says, "When your heart feels heavy." Important messages always carry weight. Over time, the intelligence center grows into a tightly connected community. They share meals, stories, and quiet moments of doubt. They celebrate small breakthroughs with nods instead of cheers. They comfort each other when the pressure becomes overwhelming. And in their shared silence, they find strength. One night, a coded message arrives that appears harmless at first. But after hours of study, the team realizes it contains the location of a Japanese transport mission. This information allows American forces to prepare thoughtfully, avoiding danger and protecting soldiers who might otherwise have faced serious risk. The codebreakers do not see the battle. They do not hear the orders given on ships or watch planes fly into formation. But later, when reports come in that American forces moved safely and successfully, the team feels a quiet sense of peace. Their work, done in silence, has saved lives once again. Across the Pacific, the Japanese forces continue to plan with care. They face new challenges every week. Their officers study the battlefield with sharp, experienced eyes. They adjust their strategies. They fight with determination. But they begin to notice something strange. The Americans seem to anticipate their moves more often than before. Whispers begin to spread among officers. Something is being leaked. Something is being seen. But what? Where? Oh. They tighten their communication again. They shift their patterns. But even the greatest walls can have cracks, especially when built during times of pressure and urgency. The American codebreakers listen patiently. They notice the changes. They adapt. They search for new patterns. And slowly they rebuild their understanding of the messages, adjusting their methods just as Japan adjusts its codes. It becomes a silent chess match across the ocean. One move, then another, each side trying to outthink the other. During one particularly long night, a young analyst looks at the older officer and asks, "Do you ever feel afraid of making a mistake?" The older officer pauses for a moment and then says, "Every day. But fear reminds us to be careful, to be humble, to double-check our work. Fear is not the enemy. Carelessness is." The young analyst nods slowly, understanding the wisdom in those simple words. The Pacific War continues to shift. American forces move closer to key islands. Japanese defenses grow stronger as they prepare for difficult battles ahead. The world senses that the conflict is entering its most intense phase. And yet, through it all, the silent work of the codebreakers remains steady, shaping operations in ways that few people will ever fully understand. One afternoon, the older officer receives a quiet report from higher command. It states that the intelligence work leading to the Yamamoto mission has played a key role in shifting momentum in the Pacific. It acknowledges the codebreakers' contribution, though the report itself is marked confidential. He reads it with a thoughtful expression. He knows his team will never receive public recognition. He knows history may one day reveal their work, but not now, not when secrecy protects their advantage. But he also knows something deeper. Their contribution is real, meaningful, and lasting. He closes the report gently and places it in a secure drawer. Then he walks into the main room where his team is working, and observes the quiet focus on their faces. They do not know about the report. They do not expect thanks. They simply continue their work because they believe it matters. He stands there for a moment, feeling a quiet pride for his team. And in a soft voice he says, "Well done." No one hears him. No one turns. But in that silent room his words find their place. The ocean continues to move, shaped now by winds, by tides, and by choices made in rooms where voices remain low. The war moves forward, but the hidden work behind it stays steady and strong. Perhaps history will remember the battles. Perhaps it will remember the famous leaders and the big decisions. But somewhere, in the deeper memory of time, there will always remain the truth that silence itself became a turning point. And it was the codebreakers, the listeners, the thinkers who learned to turn silence into strength. As the war moves further into its final years, something begins to change in the hearts of the people fighting it. Soldiers who once carried complete confidence now feel the weight of long months away from home. Commanders who once believed in fast victories now understand the deeper cost of every decision. Families who once hoped for a quick end now wait with quiet strength, knowing patience is the only gift they can offer. And somewhere in the middle of all this, the quiet world of code breaking continues, steady, unseen, and essential. The American Intelligence Center becomes a place of routine, yet every day carries the potential for discovery. The analysts have learned to read patterns and messages the way a musician reads notes, or a poet reads rhythm. They see connections hidden inside randomness. They find meaning in small details. Their minds have become trained to listen beneath the surface. But this sharp awareness comes with a price. The hours are long. Sleep is uncertain. The weight of responsibility grows heavier with every message that passes through their hands. They know that a mistake could place soldiers in danger. And they know that accuracy could save them. One young analyst wakes one morning feeling exhausted. His hands tremble slightly as he reaches for his pencil. He wonders if he can continue at this pace. The pressure feels endless. The war feels endless. But then he remembers something the older officer once said, "If you feel tired, rest your body but never rest your purpose." So he takes a deep breath, sits up straight, and begins again. Across the room, another analyst studies a message that seems simple at first glance. But as he reads it again, something catches his eye. A slight repeat in a code group, a number that appears more often than expected. He leans closer. His heart beats faster. He calls the officer over. Together they study the message carefully. Slowly the pieces connect. It contains information about Japanese supply routes that could impact upcoming operations. Once again, a small discovery carries large consequences. The officer nods, his expression calm but serious. "Good work," he says. "Your attention may save many lives." The younger analyst feels a warmth spread through him, a reminder that even small efforts matter. Across the Pacific, Japanese forces also face their own internal struggles. Their officers work tirelessly to adapt. Their soldiers fight with courage in difficult conditions. Their code specialists attempt to strengthen their encryption, searching for ways to keep their plans hidden. Yet one officer, known for his sharp intellect, senses the truth. He writes in his private journal, "We tighten our codes, but our opponent seems to tighten their understanding. We change our patterns, but they still find us. Perhaps we underestimate the strength of their minds." His words reflect not weakness but awareness, a quiet respect for an unseen enemy. Meanwhile, the pilots who flew the mission to intercept Yamamoto continue their lives with discipline and quiet strength. Some of them are involved in new missions. Some support younger pilots with training and advice. One of the pilots, who usually keeps to himself, begins writing letters home whenever he finds time. He never mentions the secret mission he cannot, but he writes about the ocean, the sky, and the feeling of flying into the unknown. His letters are simple and gentle, filled with reflections about life, purpose, and the strange nature of war. In one letter he writes, "Somewhere between the clouds and the sea, I learned that silence has its own voice." His family never fully understands what he means, but they feel the depth of his words. Back in the intelligence office, tension slowly changes into confidence. Not arrogance but calm awareness. The analysts begin to trust their instincts more. They learn to work faster without losing accuracy. They solve complex patterns with growing skill. One day the older officer gathers them and says, "The war is changing because you are changing. You are becoming stronger, wiser, and more aware. And your growth is shaping the world in ways you cannot yet see." He does not speak often, so when he does, the team listens carefully. He continues, "You may not carry weapons, but your work protects countless lives. Never forget that." The words settle over the room like a warm blanket. They help ease the stress that has been building for months. As time moves forward, American forces begin taking control of key islands. Their victories come with great cost, but each success pushes the war toward its final stage. The intelligence team plays a constant role in guiding these operations. They predict movements. They warn of risks. They help commanders understand the enemy's intentions. But as the war turns in America's favor, a different feeling begins to rise among the codebreakers, the feeling of responsibility for what comes next. They understand that with power comes caution. Their knowledge could endanger their own advantage if used too directly. They must balance action with secrecy. They must protect the method that allowed them to intercept and decode so much. One young analyst reflects late one night, "Knowing more also means choosing carefully. We cannot act on everything. We must protect the secret of how we know." This lesson becomes central to their work. One afternoon, a quiet message arrives that appears unimportant. Many analysts might have ignored it. But one codebreaker notices something unusual. The tone of the message seems different. It contains unusual phrasing and timing. He brings it to the officer, who studies it thoughtfully. The officer nods slowly. "This is not about a battle," he says. "It is about preparation. Something is changing on their side." The message reveals that Japan is planning to shift part of its communication strategy. It is subtle but important. The Americans must adapt quickly. Suddenly, the intelligence room is full of movement. Analysts gather around tables, comparing past messages to new ones. They discuss possibilities. They adjust their decoding methods. They prepare for the next phase of the intelligence war. This moment becomes another turning point, not as dramatic as the decoded Yamamoto message but just as important. It keeps American intelligence one step ahead. Across the ocean, the Japanese continue to face difficulty. Their commanders feel the pressure from losing ground. Their communication units try to adapt faster than ever before. But adaptation takes time, and time is something they do not have much of. The Japanese officer who once trusted the strength of their codes now feels uncertainty. He writes in his journal, "War changes faster than humans can. We must run not just with our feet but with our minds." The war grows heavier on both sides. In the intelligence center, the stress grows heavier too. Some analysts become exhausted. Some feel overwhelmed. Some question their own abilities. But the older officer watches them carefully. He sees their worries even when they try to hide them. One evening, after reviewing reports for hours, he gathers the team again. He speaks softly, "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to work through fear. You have done that every day. And you will continue to do that." His calm voice settles their hearts, reminding them that the work they do is difficult for a reason. It matters. The Pacific wind moves across the base, carrying the scent of salt and a hint of distant rain. The ocean glows under the moonlight. The world feels wide and uncertain. But inside the intelligence room, The young analysts continue their work with quiet determination. They flip through messages. They write notes. They search for meaning. They listen. Because listening has become their greatest strength. And every once in a while, one of them pauses and remembers the message that changed everything. The message that revealed Yamamoto's journey and shaped the turning of the war. It reminds them that even the smallest piece of information can shape history. It reminds them that silence can hold answers. It reminds them why they continue. Perhaps this is the deeper truth of war. Victory is shaped not only by those who fight on the battlefield, but also by those who listen, interpret, and understand the unseen. In the quiet world of intelligence, there is no applause, no bright medals, no dramatic music. But there is purpose, there is meaning, and there is a quiet kind of heroism that lasts long after the war is over. As the months continue to pass, a new kind of awareness begins to grow inside the intelligence center. The war is still raging, but something feels different. The Americans are moving forward with more confidence, more clarity, and more understanding of the enemy's intentions. And the Codebreakers know deep inside that they have played a quiet but powerful role in this change. The older officer, who has guided the team with patience and calm strength, often stands at the window during breaks, watching the palm trees sway gently in the warm Pacific wind. He looks out at the horizon where the ocean meets the sky, and he thinks about all the small decisions that have brought them to this moment. He remembers the day the coded message about Yamamoto was cracked, the heavy silence that filled the room, the sense that history had shifted inside a single breath. He also remembers the fear he felt, the understanding that using the information could be risky. But he remembers too the courage of the pilots who carried out the mission, and the responsibility the Codebreakers carried long after it was over. Now, months later, he sees the bigger picture forming. He sees how intelligence work has shaped the war, how it has saved lives, and how it has guided commanders through difficult decisions. And he knows that the quiet work done here will continue to shape the world long after the war ends. Inside the intelligence room, the young analysts continue their work with disciplined focus. They have grown more skillful, more intuitive, and more aware of the hidden patterns inside the enemy's messages. They can now detect shifts in tone, small changes in structure, or unusual timing with a kind of sixth sense that only comes from months of deep involvement. One analyst sits at his desk, examining a particularly long message. His eyes move across the symbols slowly. He feels something tugging at his attention, a pattern that seems almost familiar. He calls another analyst over. Together they study the message more closely. They whisper quietly, marking repeated numbers and comparing them against old references. Slowly the fog begins to lift. They realize that the message contains clues about Japanese movements toward a region where American forces are preparing to advance. The older officer reviews their findings. He nods with approval, then relays the information to Naval Command. His voice is calm, but inside he feels a quiet sense of accomplishment for his team. Once again, their work will help shape decisions on the battlefield. Across the ocean, Japanese forces continue to face pressure. Their supply lines grow thinner. Their defenses weaken. Their commanders work harder than ever to protect their remaining positions. Among them, the officer who writes in his journal about encryption struggles through long nights of planning. He reads incoming reports with a serious expression. He knows the war is becoming harder to control. In one entry he writes, "Even the strongest plans feel fragile now. The ocean carries more uncertainty each day." His words echo the growing tension on his side of the war. Yet even in conflict there are moments of humanity. A young Japanese pilot stands on a quiet beach one evening, watching the horizon. He thinks about home, about the family waiting for him, about the uncertainty of tomorrow. He does not know that his country's messages have been compromised. He does not know that American codebreakers have learned to listen so deeply. He simply stands there, lost in thought, hoping that fate will be kind to him in the coming days. His hopes are no different from the American pilot sitting near his own shoreline, watching the same ocean from another side. War divides nations, but it does not divide the simple human desire for peace and safety. Back in the American code-breaking room, a new kind of message arrives. It is shorter than most, but unusually urgent. The analysts study it carefully, but this time the meaning seems clearer than usual. The message reveals an upcoming shift in Japanese defenses that could help American forces avoid a costly mistake. The officer leans over the table, his eyes narrowing with focus. He taps the paper gently. "This," he says, "will save lives." He sends the decoded information to the commanders. Hours later, when confirmation returns that the message indeed prevented a dangerous situation for American forces, the codebreakers feel a quiet sense of pride. They do not cheer. They do not celebrate out loud. But inside they feel the warm satisfaction of knowing their efforts made a difference. The war begins to tilt more visibly now. American forces capture important islands. Supply lines strengthen. Confidence grows. Japanese forces, though still determined and courageous, begin to feel the strain of long conflict. Their communication becomes more cautious, more encrypted. But even their improved codes carry patterns that experienced analysts can read. The older officer begins noticing the emotional toll on his team. Some analysts look pale and exhausted. Some rub their eyes repeatedly. Some stare at messages with worry instead of curiosity. He understands their stress because he feels it too. One evening he speaks to them gently. "War is not only about strength," he says. "It is also about endurance. And endurance comes from taking care of your mind." He encourages them to rest when needed, to step outside for fresh air, to eat properly, and to remember that they are human beings, not machines. The team listens gratefully. They trust him not only as a leader but as someone who understands the deeper truth. Mental strength is the backbone of intelligence work. Meanwhile, in Washington, military leaders receive a steady flow of intelligence reports. They begin to see patterns that help them predict Japanese movements. They use this information to plan their final strategies. They understand that intelligence has become a key advantage, one that must be protected at all costs. They remind field commanders not to reveal that American forces have broken Japanese codes. They warn them to act carefully, to disguise their knowledge, and to rely on subtlety rather than open action. They know that if Japan discovers the truth, everything could change overnight. In quiet corners of Japan's naval offices, suspicions continue to grow. Officers worry that something is being missed. They try to trace the source of American success. Some suspect spies. Some suspect intercepted communication. Some suspect luck. But they do not realize the full truth. The Americans have learned to hear their silence, to read their structure, to understand the rhythm of their encoding. Back in the American Intelligence Center, one young analyst reflects late at night. He flips through pages of old messages. He sees the familiar patterns, the clues that once took hours to find but now appear almost immediately. He feels pride but also humility. He writes in his notebook, "The more we learn, the more we see how much we do not know. But every step forward brings peace closer." These words capture the essence of intelligence work, not certainty but progress. The Pacific wind continues to move gently across the base, carrying the sound of waves and distant aircraft. The world outside looks peaceful at times, even beautiful. But inside the intelligence rooms, the weight of war sits heavily on the shoulders of those who listen. Still they continue. Still they learn. Still they shape the war quietly, one message at a time. And perhaps that is where the heart of this story truly lies, not in the loud battles, not in the dramatic strategies, but in the quiet strength of people who listened deeply, thought carefully, and carried unseen burdens so that others might see another day. Silence, once feared, has become a tool. Silence has become understanding. Silence has become power. The world does not yet know it, but these quiet efforts are guiding history toward its turning point. As the war reaches its most intense stages, the world begins to feel the weight of every decision more clearly. Families wait anxiously for news. Soldiers move through islands filled with danger. Leaders face choices that will affect millions. And in the midst of all this, the quiet work of the codebreakers continues, steady, unseen, and deeply important. Inside the American intelligence room, the atmosphere has changed. The analysts are no longer new recruits learning the basics of code patterns. They have grown into seasoned experts who can see meaning in the smallest details. Their minds move quickly. Their focus is sharp. But with this experience comes exhaustion, and with exhaustion comes a deeper understanding of responsibility. One day an analyst sits at his desk, staring at a new message. His eyes feel heavy. His hands tremble slightly from a night without sleep. But as he studies the symbols, something familiar emerges. He leans closer. A spark of recognition lights in his mind. He calls another analyst over, and together they begin to decode the message. Slowly, like a puzzle revealing its edges, the meaning becomes clear. The message contains information about Japanese reinforcements moving toward an island where American forces are preparing to advance. This discovery could be the difference between a safe movement and a dangerous ambush. The older officer reviews the message with careful eyes. He nods once, understanding its importance. "We must send this immediately," he says. And within minutes, the information travels up the chain of command. Far away, American commanders adjust their plans. They redirect their forces, avoiding the danger revealed by the coded message. The battle that follows is difficult, but the American troops avoid a deadly trap, thanks to a discovery that began with a tired analyst blinking at a piece of paper. No one claps. No one cheers. But deep inside the intelligence room, the analysts feel something warm and kind within themselves. They made a difference, not through force but through careful listening. Across the Pacific, Japanese forces struggle to maintain their defensive lines. Their commanders work tirelessly to adapt. Their soldiers fight bravely in harsh conditions. But with every month that passes, the pressure grows heavier. Supplies become limited. Communication becomes difficult. And uncertainty grows like a shadow across their decision-making. One Japanese officer, who has spent years designing secure communication systems, stares at a blank sheet of paper for a long time. He feels the weight of everything slipping through cracks he cannot see. His journal entries grow shorter now. More somber. More reflective. In one entry he writes, "We write messages to control the future, yet the future continues slipping away." His words carry sadness but also clarity, a recognition that no matter how strong a system is, nothing remains unbreakable forever. Meanwhile, the pilots who once flew the Yamamoto mission live their lives in different ways now. Some continue flying missions across the Pacific, navigating storms and long stretches of ocean. Some train younger pilots, teaching them how to stay calm in dangerous skies. Some write letters home, capturing small moments of beauty amid the chaos of war. One pilot, now older and more experienced, sits inside his plane before a routine flight. He touches the controls gently, remembering the day he flew farther than he ever thought possible, guided by a mission he now understands more deeply. He closes his eyes and whispers, "Courage is quiet." He doesn't say it to anyone else. He says it to himself, and to the sky. Back in the intelligence center, the officer gathers the team for a brief meeting. He looks at their faces, noticing the mix of strength and tiredness in their eyes. He speaks softly but with purpose. "We are nearing the most difficult part of the war," he says. "And that means our work becomes more important, not less. The enemy will try new strategies. They will hide their intentions carefully. But we must remain patient. We must keep listening." He pauses, letting his words settle into the air. "You have done more than you know," he continues. "Your work has saved lives. Your work has shaped decisions. And your work will continue to guide us through these final stages." Some analysts look down, humbled. Others smile softly. The room feels warmer than before, not physically but emotionally. They understand that they are part of something larger than themselves. The Pacific wind still blows outside, carrying the smell of the ocean. Waves roll against distant shores. Nature continues its rhythm, unaware of the struggles playing out across its waters. But inside the intelligence room, every sound, every movement, every message carries meaning. One evening, a message arrives that is strangely different from the others. It is longer, more complex, filled with new code structures. The analysts gather around it, sensing that something important lies within. They work through the night, decoding it step by step. When the meaning becomes clear, the room falls silent. The message reveals that the Japanese military is planning a large-scale movement to counter American forces. This information is critical. It will help the Americans prepare. It will help them avoid danger. It will guide them in choosing the right time to act. The officer reads the decoded message quietly. Then he turns to his team and says, "You have done something remarkable tonight." But even as he speaks, he feels a deeper truth settling in his heart. He knows the war is turning. He knows the end is getting closer. And he knows that the quiet work done in this room has played a major role in that shift. Across the ocean, Japanese commanders receive their own intelligence reports. They prepare for difficult battles. They know the Americans are gaining strength. They know their own forces are stretched thin. But they do not yet know how much of their communication has been understood. Their journals begin to reflect worry, hope, regret, and determination. War is not simple for them either. They face the same fears, the same doubts, the same longing for peace. And in this shared humanity, the truth becomes clear. War shapes everyone it touches. Back in the American base, a young analyst finishes his shift and steps outside. He watches the sunset paint the sky in soft shades of orange and gold. He listens to the wind, to distant waves, to the quiet heartbeat of the world. He realizes something profound. War may be loud, but understanding is quiet. War may be destructive, but intelligence is protective. War may divide nations, but the desire for safety and peace connects them all. He closes his eyes and whispers, "May this end soon." His simple words float gently into the air, carried by the wind, perhaps felt by no one, yet full of meaning. Inside the intelligence room, the analysts continue their work. They read new messages. They find new patterns. They guide commanders. They protect lives. And through their quiet actions, they help bring the war one step closer to its end. Perhaps this is the greatest truth of all. Great changes often begin with small, silent moments. Great victories often come from those who work without applause. And great peace often comes from those who listen more deeply than others. The Codebreakers do not know exactly when the war will end. But they know their work will help speed its arrival. They know their efforts matter. And they know they must continue. One message, one discovery, one quiet moment at a time. The final year of the war approaches slowly but powerfully, like a distant storm drawing nearer with every passing day. Across the world, people begin to sense a change. Soldiers feel the tension in their bones. Families feel it in the silence of letters that come late or not at all. Commanders feel it in the pressure of decisions that hold the weight of thousands of lives. And far from the battlefields, inside a quiet American base, the Codebreakers continue their work, steady, calm, focused. By now, their room has become more than a workplace. It is a world of its own. A world of symbols, patterns, and the soft scratch of pencils on paper. A world where tired eyes see deeper truths. A world where silence is not empty, but full of meaning waiting to be discovered. The older officer enters the room early each morning, watching his team already at work. Some analysts sip warm coffee. Some stretch tired hands. Some study pages with deep focus. He feels pride not because they are perfect but because they continue despite the weight they carry. He walks slowly between the desks, noticing small details, the careful writing, the organized notes, the thoughtful frowns. He sees how much they have grown, how much they have given, and how much they have sacrificed. One young analyst looks up and says quietly, "Sir, do you think the end is near?" The officer pauses, choosing his words with care. "I think the world is moving," he says. "And when the world moves, change follows. We must be ready for that change." The analyst nods, understanding the deeper meaning. War does not end suddenly. It ends slowly, through thousands of decisions, movements, and moments of understanding. As days pass, the messages coming from Japanese communication begin to show signs of strain. Their codes still hold strength, but patterns appear that hint at shortages, retreat, and the pressure they face across many fronts. The analysts read these messages with quiet sympathy, not for the war itself, but for the human lives behind each decision. The Japanese officer who once wrote confidently in his journal now fills his pages with heavier thoughts. He writes, "The future feels fragile. Our messages once felt secure. Now they feel like glass that can break at any moment." He does not know that the Americans have already cracked the structure of these messages, but he senses it in the shifting balance of power. Across the ocean, American forces continue to move steadily forward. Their strategies have become sharper. Their operations have become more efficient. And their confidence has quietly grown, shaped by the intelligence that guides them from far away. American commanders read the Codebreakers reports with deep respect. They know the information is reliable. They know it has prevented disasters. They know it has saved lives. Some commanders quietly say, "Our victories begin in that silent room." They never say it loudly. But they feel it every time they plan a mission with better understanding. One pilot, one of the few who flew the Yamamoto mission, sits in his cockpit before a routine flight watching the sunrise. The sky glows soft orange. The ocean shines like a sheet of glass. He breathes in slowly. He remembers the mission that once shaped his life. The long flight. The silence. The weight of what he was asked to do. He remembers the faces of the men he flew with, their determination, their fear, their courage. He whispers to himself, "History is carried in silence." Then he starts his engine, ready for another day in the sky. Back in the intelligence room, a new message arrives. One that immediately captures the team's attention. It is long, dense, filled with new patterns. The analysts gather around it, their minds sharp despite their exhaustion. They begin to decode it piece by piece. Hours pass. The sun moves across the sky. Their pencils move quickly, their voices low and focused. Finally, they find the meaning. The message reveals a major shift in Japanese strategy, a sign that they are preparing for a last stand in key regions of the Pacific. The older officer reads the decoded message slowly. His face grows thoughtful. "This," he says quietly, "marks a turning point." He sends the report to the command center. High-ranking officers study it carefully. They realize that Japan is preparing for a difficult and costly final phase of defense. And with this understanding, the Americans begin to plan their next steps carefully. The intelligence team does not celebrate. But they understand the meaning of their discovery. They know that the war is entering its final, hardest chapters. Over the next weeks, the pace of decoding increases. Messages arrive in larger numbers. Some carry warnings. Some carry hints. Some carry hope. The analysts work through the nights, fighting tiredness with quiet determination. The older officer worries about their health. He encourages rest, short breaks, and fresh air. But he also knows that they will push themselves because they understand what is at stake. One night, the young analyst from earlier sits alone at his desk after everyone else has left. He opens his notebook and writes a simple line. "We are not fighting the war. We are guiding the path to its end." These words comfort him. They remind him of purpose. Across the ocean, Japanese soldiers hang on to their positions with grit and discipline. Their officers feel the pressure, but they do not give up. They continue to fight for their homeland, for their families, for their beliefs. The Japanese officer writes in his journal, "Even in difficulty we stand. We do not break." But the horizon feels different now. His words reflect the emotional reality of war, the determination mixed with fear, the hope mixed with uncertainty. Meanwhile, American pilots fly missions with increasing skill. They rely on intelligence more than ever. They know when danger is near. They know when opportunities appear. They trust the codebreakers even if they never meet them. One pilot says to his wingman, "Someone out there is watching the enemy for us. We owe them our lives." His words are simple but true. As spring approaches, the war begins to show clearer signs of coming to an end. More islands fall under American control. Japanese communications reveal desperation, shortages, and the heavy weight of sustained conflict. Inside the intelligence room, the analysts feel the shift as strongly as the soldiers on the front lines. They decode messages that speak of retreat, limited supplies, and exhausted forces. But they also see messages filled with determination, hope, and resolve from the Japanese side. War is complicated. Emotion has no borders. One day the older officer gathers the team again, not to decode a message but to reflect. He speaks softly, "We are nearing the final chapters. But the end of war does not mean the end of our duty. When peace comes we must help protect it. We must learn from this. We must remember that silence can save lives not just during war but after it." His words touch the hearts of every analyst in the room. They understand that their work is not only about conflict. It is about shaping a safer world. The waves outside continue to roll gently. The sun rises and sets. And the intelligence center continues to work, guiding the final movements of a war that has changed millions of lives. They do this not with weapons, not with loud voices, but with patience, awareness, and the quiet strength of minds that refuse to give up. The war is not over yet. But the end is coming, slowly, steadily, shaped by silence, shaped by understanding, shaped by the quiet hands of those who learn to listen. The final months of the war approach with a strange mixture of urgency and quiet. On some days the fighting grows louder, sharper, more desperate. On other days the world feels strangely still, as if holding its breath. Soldiers on both sides feel the weight of time pressing down on them. Families far away pray for peace. Leaders search for the right moment to make decisions that will shape the newborn world waiting on the horizon. And through it all, the quiet intelligence rooms remain steady, glowing with lamplight even in the darkest hours of night. Inside one such room, the American codebreakers go through their familiar routines. They read, analyze, compare, decode. Their hands move quickly across papers. Their eyes scan symbols and numbers with the ease of people who have lived inside these patterns for years. Their minds, once strained by the unfamiliar world of cryptology, now move with calm confidence. But beneath this confidence lies something deeper, a mixture of fatigue, hope, and reflection. They know the war is reaching its final stage. They can sense it in the changing patterns of the messages. They feel it in the tone of Japanese communication, which now carries a heavy mix of resolve and strain. And they hear it in the conversations among commanders, who speak more often of planning for peace than planning for battle. The older officer, who has guided the codebreakers through every high and low, walks into the room one evening. He holds a new message in his hand, not a coded message but a quiet update from higher command. He speaks softly, "The end is coming. Not today. Not tomorrow. But soon." The analysts look up, surprised not by the news but by the way he says it, with calm certainty and deep emotion. "We must continue our work," he adds. "Until the last moment. Until the last message. Until the world becomes quiet again." His words settle in the room like dust caught in the last rays of evening light. Across the ocean, Japanese forces feel the same shift. Their soldiers continue to defend with strength and honor, but their leaders now face the reality of dwindling supplies, damaged fleets, and shrinking possibilities. Their communications reveal a quiet desperation, a desire to hold on, to survive, to hope for a miracle that feels more distant each day. In his private journal, the Japanese communication officer writes, "We are in the final stretch of a long road. The sea feels heavier now. The future feels uncertain. But we continue." His words capture not defeat but the honest weight of war. At the American Intelligence Center, the codebreakers study each new message with careful attention. Some messages hold nothing more than simple logistics. Others bring insight into the shifting balance of forces. And occasionally one message carries something unexpected, an emotion hidden between the lines. One day, a message arrives that includes a short phrase, likely meant for morale between Japanese units. It says, "Keep your spirits strong. The dawn comes after the longest night." The young analyst reading it feels something tighten inside his chest. He realizes that the men writing and receiving that message are not so different from him. They too are tired. They too want the war to end. They too are human. He shows the message to the older officer. The officer studies it quietly, then nods, saddened and moved. "War divides nations," he says softly, "but not humanity." The young analyst carries those words with him for days. Meanwhile, the American pilots continue flying missions. Some support ground troops. Some scout for enemy movements. Some transport supplies. They feel the war's weight too, the long hours, the uncertainty, the worry for friends who did not return from earlier missions. One pilot walks along the airstrip after landing from a long flight. He watches the sun sink behind the trees, turning the sky gold. "It feels closer," he whispers. "The end. I can almost feel it." He does not know why he feels this way, but he does. Back at the intelligence center, the pace of work grows even more intense as the war narrows toward its end. The analysts know that even in the final moments, a single missed clue could put soldiers in danger. So they work with sharp eyes, steady hands, and quiet determination. One night, a long message arrives. The team gathers around it. Their hands move quickly, pencils tapping. Their eyes focus sharply. The room grows warmer as hours pass. They do not speak much, but when they do, their voices are calm and steady. Finally, the message reveals details about a Japanese defensive shift. The information is critical. It will help American forces prepare for one of the final major operations of the war. The older officer reviews the decoded message with a slow, deep breath. This, he says quietly, may be one of the last major pieces. He sends it to the command center. Then he sits down for a moment, letting the weight of the moment settle into his body. Outside, the world grows quiet. The moon shines over the palm trees. The ocean whispers against the distant shore. It feels like the world is preparing itself, for ending, for beginning, for something new. The next morning, the analysts arrive tired but hopeful. They can feel it now, the closeness of closure. Messages arriving from Japanese communication channels grow shorter. Their structure suggests retreat, realignment, and uncertainty. A young analyst whispers to another, "Do you think they know it too?" The other analyst nods slowly. "They must. Everyone must." The Japanese officer writes in his journal with shaking hands, "I feel the weight of history on my shoulders. We continue, but the future is no longer ours to shape alone." His words carry sorrow, not anger, not bitterness, just sorrow. And across the world, people on both sides prepare for what comes next. In the intelligence room, the older officer gathers the team one final time before the war's turning point. He looks at them with warmth and respect. "You have carried the weight of silence," he says. "You have listened when others could not. You have seen what others could not see. And because of your work, the war is closer to ending." The analysts sit quietly, humbled by his words. "We do not fight with weapons," he continues. "We fight with understanding. And understanding has saved lives, thousands of lives." His voice remains calm but deeply emotional. "When the war ends," he says, "people will thank the soldiers, the sailors, the pilots. And they should. But know this, the peace that follows will also be built from your work." The room stays silent for a long moment, not the heavy silence of fear but the warm silence of meaning. As they return to their desks, something feels different. The tension, the worry, the pressure, it all feels lighter now, replaced by a soft sense of purpose. They continue decoding messages, but now each message feels like a final step on a long journey. Across the ocean, American pilots prepare for their final missions. They look at the sky differently now, not only as a battlefield but as a path home. Japanese soldiers prepare for uncertain days ahead. They feel the same mix of fear and hope that their American counterparts feel. In both nations, hearts wait for peace. One evening, the young analyst steps outside. The sky is glowing with the final colors of sunset. He listens to the wind moving through the palm trees. He hears waves rolling in the distance. He places his notebook on his lap and writes. The world is tired. It wants to breathe again. He closes the notebook and looks up at the sky. "For all of us," he whispers softly, "may this night truly be the last long night." As darkness settles across the Pacific, the war moves toward its final dawn. The final phase of the war arrives not with celebration, but with a heavy, quiet breath. It is a time filled with deep reflection, by soldiers in the field, by families waiting at home, by leaders making their last, most difficult choices, and by those who have worked in silence, shaping the direction of war through thought rather than force. Inside the American Intelligence Center, the Codebreakers feel this shift more than anyone. Messages still arrive, but they now carry a tone that feels different. Less confident, less sharp, more desperate. The older officer senses it immediately. He has seen patterns in numbers, rhythms and codes, and emotions hidden between lines of text. Now he sees something else entirely, the signs of an ending. One morning, a short message arrives from the Japanese side. It contains instructions about conserving resources, adjusting communication routes, and preparing for the unexpected. It is not a message of strength. It is a message of survival. The young analyst who reads it pauses, feeling a tightness in his chest. He shows it to the officer, who nods slowly. They are preparing, the officer says. Preparing for change. Not long after, more messages arrive. Some are fragmented. Some are unclear. Some carry hints of political pressure, confusion, or emotional strain. The pattern that once felt sharp and disciplined now feels softer, like something slowly unraveling. The analysts work with care, knowing that even now, especially now, mistakes cannot be allowed. War does not become simple just because it is near its end. Far across the ocean, Japanese commanders face decisions heavier than any they have made before. Their soldiers are tired. Their supplies are low. Their people are exhausted. Their communication officer writes in his journal, "We do not know what the future holds, but we feel its approach in every message we send." His writing shakes slightly, not from weakness, but from the emotional weight of watching his nation reach the edge of its strength. Meanwhile, on the American side, soldiers prepare for the final push. Pilots look at the horizon and hope they will see it for many years to come. Families back home read letters with hands that tremble between hope and fear. And the quiet codebreakers continue to read messages that hold the final clues to the war's direction. One day, a message arrives that feels almost symbolic. It is short, just a few words. But its tone is unlike anything the analysts have seen before. It speaks of needing guidance, needing clarity, needing a future. The young analyst stares at it for a long moment. He realizes something powerful. The enemy is not made of steel or planes or warships. The enemy is made of people, humans with wishes, fears, and families, just like the Americans decoding their messages. He whispers to himself, "We are all tired. All of us." In another part of the base, one of the pilots walks through a quiet field near the airstrip. He looks at the sky, searching for meaning in the clouds. He thinks about everything he has seen, everything he has lost, and everything he hopes to see in the days ahead. He remembers the silent mission he once flew, the one that changed the war in a way the world still does not fully understand. He thinks about the weight he carried then and the weight he still carries now. He whispers, "Peace. I hope it comes soon." And somewhere on the other side of the ocean, a Japanese pilot stands at his own airfield, staring at the same kind of sky. He feels the same mix of hope and fear. He wishes for the safety of his family. He wonders what tomorrow will bring. 2 men, 2 nations, 1 sky. The intelligence center remains the quiet heart of understanding. New messages arrive less frequently now. And those that do arrive seem filled with uncertainty, hesitation, and emotional fatigue. The older officer reads these messages not just with strategy in mind, but with empathy. He understands that war is ending not because one side has become stronger, but because both sides have reached a point where continuing would mean losing more than either nation can bear. One evening he gathers the team for another meeting. He speaks softly, but his voice carries through the room with calm power. "We are entering the final chapter," he says. "And with it comes a responsibility, not to fight harder but to think deeper." The analysts listen carefully. They know what he means. The end of a war does not erase its consequences. It does not heal its wounds. It does not bring back those who were lost. The officer continues, "We must learn from this. We must understand the value of silence, the power of information, the responsibility of knowledge." He pauses, letting the meaning settle in their hearts. "When peace arrives," he says, "the world must remember that war began with voices, but it changed with listening." His words echo through the room. They become part of the story, part of the lesson, part of the quiet wisdom the analysts will carry with them forever. Outside, night falls gently over the base. The wind moves through the palm trees in soft waves. The stars appear one by one, shining above the Pacific like scattered thoughts waiting to be understood. A young analyst steps outside and looks up at the stars. He thinks about everything he has learned over the long months of war, about patience, responsibility, and the strange strength of silence. He realizes that the world will always have conflict, but it will also always have a chance to listen, to understand, to choose a different path. He whispered to himself, "If we can learn to listen, maybe the world can change." Across the ocean in a dim Japanese office, the communication officer writes one final line in his journal. When this ends, may humanity rise from its shadows. Back in the intelligence center, the older officer receives a message, not from the enemy but from American leadership. It is short and formal, but its meaning is powerful. It informs him that peace talks are beginning. It signals that the end is near. He closes his eyes for a moment. A long breath escapes him, not sadness, not relief, but something deeper. Something like gratitude. He walks into the intelligence room where his team is working quietly. He does not need to speak loudly. He simply says, "It's beginning. The end is near." The analysts look up. Some smile softly. Some close their eyes. Some simply breathe deeply. But no one celebrates. Not yet. Because peace is not a moment of celebration. It is a moment of reflection. The war that once seemed endless is now approaching its final breath. The world is preparing to become whole again. And the codebreakers, who shaped the war with quiet courage, begin to understand that their work has not only protected lives, but taught them something timeless. War shows what humans can destroy. Peace shows what humans must rebuild. And intelligence shows what humans must learn. The ocean keeps moving. The sky keeps changing. And the world waits for the dawn after the longest night. The final days of the war unfold with a strange, almost unreal quiet. After years of noise, chaos, and fear, the world seems to pause, as if unsure how to breathe without conflict stirring the air. The Pacific, once filled with the thunder of engines and explosions, now feels wider, softer, almost peaceful. And across nations, people wait for words that will confirm what their hearts have long hoped for. Inside the American Intelligence Center, the codebreakers continue working until the very last moment. Even as negotiations begin, even as reports grow hopeful, they do not stop. They read every message. They decode every signal. They watch for any last movement that could surprise the world. Their focus remains steady, their duty unchanged. Finally, one morning the message arrives. Not from the enemy. Not from a battlefield. But from their own high command. The war is over. No coded message follows it. No secret numbers. No hidden instructions. Just simple words carried across the wires with more weight than any message that came before. The war is over. For a long moment the intelligence room becomes still. Not the tense stillness of decoding a secret, not the heavy stillness of fear. This is a peaceful stillness, soft and full. One young analyst lowers his pencil. Another closes her eyes. The older officer places a hand on the desk, steadying himself as emotion passes through him like a quiet wave. They do not cheer. They do not shout. They simply breathe. Because peace, when it finally arrives, is a gentle thing. Later that evening, the entire team gathers outside the building. The sun is sinking into the ocean, turning the sky into shades of gold and rose. The palm trees sway softly, as if bowing to the end of a long, difficult journey. The older officer looks at his team, the people who carried secrets, solved puzzles, and held the weight of invisible battles. He sees their tired eyes, their hopeful smiles, their quiet pride. He speaks softly, like a father speaking to his children. You may not wear medals, he says, but you carry something greater. You carry the knowledge that you helped bring the world back to peace. The team listens, hearts full. You worked in silence, he continues, but your silence shaped history. You fought a war of the mind, and you won it with patience, with humility, and with care. A deep calm settles over them as his words sink in. Remember this, he says, peace is not built by victory alone. It is built by understanding, by learning, by listening. He lets the wind finish the rest. Across the ocean, Japanese officers receive the same news. Some bow their heads. Some sit in silence. Some write final words in their journals, reflections on duty, sorrow, honor, and hope. The communication officer who spent years building codes and protecting secrets writes his final line. May the next generation speak more than we had to hide. His words mark the end of his part in history. As days pass, soldiers on both sides begin returning home. Ships sail back across wide oceans. Planes land for the last time. Pilots step onto solid ground with relief etched deeply into their faces. Families embrace loved ones. Towns ring bells. Cities breathe again. And in these moments, the story of intelligence begins to fade into the background. The world celebrates its visible heroes, the soldiers, the sailors, the airmen. And they deserve it. But somewhere in quiet rooms where no crowds gather, the codebreakers pack away their papers, turn off their lamps, and close the doors that once guarded the secrets of nations. Their work is done. But their legacy, like the messages they once revealed, still speaks quietly. For it was not only strength that shaped this war. It was also thought, observation, understanding, and silence. The silence that once belonged to the enemy became a tool of peace. The silence of the intelligence rooms became a shield. The silence between one human and another became a reminder that war is not made by nations alone. It is lived by people. The pilots who flew the Yamamoto mission move on with their lives. Some return home. Some continue serving. Some grow old and tell quiet stories to their children, not of enemies but of skies, of oceans, of courage. One of them, now an older man, sits on a porch years later watching the evening light fade. His grandson asks him, "Grandpa, what was the war like?" The old pilot does not answer at first. He closes his eyes, remembering the sky, the silence, the long flight that changed everything. Then he says softly, "War teaches you how precious peace is." And that is enough. Back in America, one of the codebreakers keeps a small notebook. Inside it are simple sentences he wrote during the war, thoughts, reflections, quiet truths. He opens it years later, reading the words with gentle nostalgia. He stops on one sentence that he wrote near the end. "A whisper changed the world." He smiles knowing it was true. Because the story of this war is not only the story of battles. It is the story of signals, of listening, of quiet heroism, of people who found strength not in noise but in silence. The Pacific Ocean, once torn by conflict, eventually returns to its natural rhythm. Waves rise and fall, touching shores that have seen both war and peace. The sky, once filled with planes of both nations, becomes simply a sky again, wide, open, and free. And the intelligence rooms, once filled with urgent whispers, become quiet places where dust gathers on old machines. But their legacy remains alive in every moment of peace that followed. Perhaps this is the final truth the world must hear. War is loud. But peace is born in silence. It is born in the quiet decisions made by unseen people. It is born in the courage of those who refuse to give up. It is born in the patience of those who listen. It is born in the understanding of those who try to see beyond enemy lines. It is born in every whisper that carries truth across oceans. And so, as the documentary draws to a close, we return to the beginning, to the quiet room filled with wires and tired young men, where a message once arrived in the dark. A message that was meant to be hidden. A message that was never supposed to be heard. A message that changed the course of history. That moment reminds us of something timeless. Even in the darkest nights of war, there are people listening for the light. Even in chaos, there are minds searching for meaning. Even in conflict, there are hearts hoping for peace. And sometimes, it is the softest sound, the sound hidden beneath silence, that guides the world toward a new dawn. The war ends. The world exhales. And silence, once a weapon, becomes a promise. A promise that we can learn. A promise that we can grow. A promise that we can build a future shaped not by fear, but by understanding. A promise that peace, once earned, must never be taken for granted. And as the waves of the Pacific continue their endless rhythm, the story of the quiet codebreakers remains. A reminder that some of history's greatest victories are born not in the roar of battle, but in the gentle turning of silent pages.